This is Stephen Hall, who conducts what's the latest reincarnation of the choir's name, Stephen?
It's now the Civil Service Choir officially.
It started off as being etc.,
It did
which I thought
indeed,
was
yes.
very witty.
Yeah, so we did discuss whether the change of name was a good idea or not, didn't we?
That's that's a tricky balance. Okay, so
Yes.
this is Stephen. Also here is Matt, who'll say hello. Matt is my partner in crime on the Camino project. Some of you know a lot about it, some of you don't. But Matt will just say hello.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome.
As you can tell, Matt is a singer and a bass baritone with a very resonant voice, both speaking and singing.
With a beer in his hand, that's why.
Very good. So, thank you for coming. Stephen, tell me, what have you been doing in lockdown? Let's start with that.
Well, I haven't drunk all the bottles of champagne that are empty behind me. That hasn't been my lockdown survival kit. They're just a collection of champagne bottles that normally sit on top of a cupboard in the kitchen, but I'm doing a major repainting job in the kitchen as possibly lockdown 2 activity. So I've moved them all here. What have I been doing? As I'm sure every choir would say, this has been a terrible, terrible time for choirs. And it's also been a terrible time for people trying to do their day jobs. And being in the civil service, it's been very challenging. Overnight, we were told to start working from home. And for many of us, we then ended up working very long hours, and things were in a state of crisis for a long time. So the idea of singing or doing anything chorally just went out the window for a while, but obviously things have settled down a bit, and a few activities have proceeded. It's probably worth talking about what the Civil Service Choir is all about, and where we were and where we are now. The Civil Service Choir is about the same age as the Brandenburg Festival. We were 10 years old last year. I started it as a small choir covering 3 government departments. And initially it had no name, but it was eventually called etc. because it was DEFRA, the Environment Department, Department for Transport, and what was the Department for Communities and Local Government, but now is the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So the ETC that formed the word etc. were Environment, Transport and Communities. And that was how we were established. It started off with 4 people at the very first rehearsal in a basement club room, and thankfully grew beyond that. And our first concert, we had 25 people, and we now have over 150 people as active members. And we do concerts in St Johnston's Square with orchestra with 120 singers on stage. We do major choral works, standard ones, Mozart and Beethoven, but we've tackled, for example, the Poulenc Stabat Mater, which is a formidable piece. So we were doing some really big things, and very frustratingly, I think last year was the most incredible year for us, and it was sort of setting us on a path that was getting more and more exciting. We've done 126 performances so far since starting the choir. So each year is very, very busy, and we had 23 performances last year. 5 of those were formal concerts, and 18 were other performances. Some of those were very small scale, others were slightly larger, but we were very, very busy. And I did the maths and worked out that we probably in total had 5,000 people across all the audiences that we had last year. We were doing concerts and performances in Westminster Abbey. We had 3 in St Johnston's Square. We did a Vivaldi Gloria for you at St Martin in the Fields. We did something at Central Hall, Westminster. We did 2 things at Lancaster House, which is a lovely state building, the interior of which is used for Buckingham Palace in the Crown, and so on, some amazing things. And then this has all suddenly crashed to nothing, which has been very upsetting. So certainly with the Civil Service Choir, there was no way initially that we could even think about doing anything because everyone was so busy. I was contemplating having a kettle in my upstairs bedroom, which was then my office, because at times there wasn't time to go downstairs to put the kettle on. So there was no way that me contacting the civil service choir and saying, hey folks, let's do something, was going to get a very good response. However, there are a few people on here this evening who are from my community choir that I run locally in West Wimbledon. And we switched to a Zoom-based rehearsal program immediately during lockdown and learnt how that worked over the weeks and got better at it in terms of making the best use of what Zoom can and cannot do. And that gave me some good experiences about how we might progress were I to be able to get the civil service choir up and running a bit in terms of Zoom-based activity. I was also intrigued by the idea of doing virtual recordings, something I'd never done before. I participated in, I think it was the stay-at-home choir, and I participated in the first two things that they did, which allowed me to understand what it was like as the participant and to get a bit of an insight as to how it might work technically. And then I spent the Easter weekend reviewing YouTube instructions on how to do virtual choirs and learning about that, and had experimented by singing 4 parts, recording them, and then trying to stitch them together using the free software Audacity. Sounded all right, so I proposed to the Civil Service Choir Committee, how about we have a go at doing this? So we started recording a piece that had been commissioned for us, an arrangement of Don't Think Twice, Bob Dylan. And it was starting to come across very well, and I was playing it to the community choir at the art centre where I do that choir. And one of the choir members there is a very serious amateur sound engineer, serious enough that he has a shed or something at the bottom of his garden with a whole lot of kit. And he said, I'm very impressed with what you've done there. I think I can help you. And he then took over the technical side of it for me and produced our first virtual recording, and it worked really well. I then created the video just by recording people on Zoom singing to it, and just took the footage of that, not the sound, but the footage, to stitch that together to create our cheap man's version of virtual combined video footage. And that worked very well. We were then asked by, in fact, my department, because I work in the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, they wanted us to do something for VE Day. So we did the same exercise and put something together, and that went down very well. And we've then twice been asked to do things subsequently for various events. And I said earlier about the 5,000 audience that we had in concerts and things last year. It's obviously not the same, but we have reached 5,000 people with the virtual performances we've done so far. So it's not completely a disaster, that we have provided something to people. The trouble is, it is a heck of a lot of work. And in striving to make it better, the sound engineer and I have worked closely together, working out how to improve things. So we first of all had people singing to a computerized sound backing track, and we thought it might get better were I to be conducting on screen, and to have people having sung the backing track, and then we engineer their recording and then get people to sing along to that recording. So that's what we did for our third recording, and then similarly for our last recording, which was a much more ambitious piece. It's an excerpt from the Sunrise Mass by Ola Yelo, which is quite complicated. And so I had to persuade some very brave choir members to record it for them to be used as the template for everyone else. So that's our current state of play with recordings. In putting the video together, I'm still at the moment just using Zoom capture as the basis of it. I haven't got time to start playing around with video editing in great detail. But I did, for the last one, take some footage of our concert when we performed the whole work last year at St. John Smith Square, and just briefly have it appearing. And it was it just made the whole thing rather more poignant, because towards the end you see us standing on the stage with a full orchestra getting the applause, and then we're reduced to 25 people on a computer screen. So it was something that brought a few tears to a few eyes. So that was all very well. In terms of sort of keeping the choir very active, after Easter, it felt like we were at a stage where civil servants could potentially take a lunch break. And so we could potentially go back to having a Monday lunchtime rehearsal, albeit doing one via Zoom. And to keep people interested, we were due to perform a very big piece by an American composer called Dan Forrest called Jubilate Deo. It's in 7 languages, including Hebrew, Chinese Mandarin, Spanish, Latin. It's very complicated. And I thought that might be a good piece to keep everyone motivated, because it wouldn't be an easy thing, and we could have some language coaching given by choir members for those who could speak the language as well. And so we worked through the entire piece during the summer term, and some very brave people did actually record themselves doing it, but without the intention we'd ever put it together as a virtual recording. I think the very early stages of it, I was thinking, wow, we could do a really quite exciting virtual recording of this and perhaps get an orchestra to do it. But the reality is just trying to keep everyone motivated to keep on with it during a whole term was a big challenge. But we had still sort of 25, 30 people on each rehearsal, probably sort of 35 people. So that was good. And recognizing people were not necessarily able to stick to a Monday lunchtime, I actually ran 2 rehearsals. So I did one on Monday lunchtime and one on Wednesday evening. And then my community choir, I was running still as a virtual choir on a Tuesday evening. So still being quite busy at trying to keep choirs going. And then obviously there have been a few choirs that have very recently met for real and been doing real rehearsals. Needless to say, as a civil service choir, we have to be extraordinarily careful to be seen to be doing the right things. And so whilst I was aware of other choirs having started rehearsing, I didn't leap into that straight away. I looked into it into a lot of detail, and I have the advantage, in fact, one of my colleagues I think is on this today, I have the advantage of people working in the Department for Culture, Media, Digital Culture, Media and Sport, and they put me in contact with the very people who actually write the guidance. So we said, look, we are the civil service choir. Can we do this? And what can we do within the guidance? And we started last week.
Wow.
And had 2 rehearsals last week. There's a church down the road from a number of our offices that we have very strong connections with. And on Monday, we did an all-soul service, 13 singers, very spaced out. And that was quite something to be standing in front of a group, albeit a small group, not 120 like I'm used to, but a small group. And we did an all-soul service, and it was a very special experience. I had been hoping that we would be able to go and sing at the Civil Service Rifles Memorial on the terrace of Somerset House this Sunday for Remembrance Sunday, but not surprisingly, they've said they're going to be closing the place, and so we can't do that. So like everyone else, I'm just hoping that come December, Boris is right, and we can return to something that might be resembling real activity. If not, I'm anticipating that we will try and do a virtual recording of something for Christmas, because there are a number of outlets within the civil service where that would be going down very well. So that's the plan. In terms of the community choir, they were also very brave and recorded themselves, and I stitched together a few renditions of what they'd offered using just Audacity. I didn't want to bother my sound engineer colleague because he was busy working on civil service choir projects. I didn't want to overload him, so I did it myself. And there was a special event at the Arts Centre where we're based a few weeks ago, and 2 of the pieces that we did were presented as part of that. So the community choir have also been active in trying to record themselves and put things together. But it's all very despairing. So as I said, I think this year was going to be potentially even better year. We had 3 concerts at St John Smith Square booked. I was due in 2 or 3 weeks' time to be conducting Will Todd's Mass in Blue with a big band in the London Jazz Festival at St John Smith Square. Gone. So yes.
Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like this has dimmed your enthusiasm at all. I think the first thing that springs to mind, I hope he's not here. But is your boss aware of exactly how much time you spend on all these other projects? Because I can't see how you've got any time at all to do any work with all this going on.
I'm able to juggle. In terms of administering the choir, I've got a great committee who have been now on the committee for a long time and are very supportive. So when it was started, I was running a heck of a lot of it, doing the admin. But over the years, I've got a nice team to help me. And I think nothing. When we were still in offices, I would stay in the office until 10 o'clock at night sometimes, doing the choir admin or whatever it was after a day's work, just to juggle things. So I'm just used to trying to squeeze as much into my life as possible to keep things going.
Well, it's amazing, and I admire your energy and your incredible organisation, and I empathise totally with your feelings about the dreariness of it in some ways. It came as quite a blow to all of us, and quite when it will recover, we're not sure.
No, and it makes things so difficult to plan. So we've been asked, there's a project that's been sort of bubbling away for a while now, a project where we might do a collaborative thing with the Parliament Choir, with Westminster Abbey, and with a choir that represents the judiciary. And it's meant to represent the concept of the four sides of Parliament Square: the civil service, Parliament, the church, and the judiciary. And the suggestion is that we might do it as a celebration of the Queen's Jubilee in 2022.
Wow.
But in my more negative thoughts, I'm thinking, will the choir still exist in 2022? Am I in a position that I can start to be working towards a project like that, where things may be very different? And the challenge for the civil service choir and for me keeping it going is that up to now, it's been a Monday lunchtime choir, and people have gone from their offices, come rain or shine, spent an hour in a church down the road, and then gone back to their desks. If, as is very likely, it's a very high proportion of people who are going to be working from home, I'm going to have very few of my choir members physically where they used to be, being able to come to rehearsals. It might mean that we can change to an evening base and just hope that people are willing to come into London and participate. But that's a very different ethos to the one that we were pursuing. We did occasionally do evening activities, but we were first and foremost a lunchtime choir. And also, in terms of our audience base, we were mainly doing our really big concerts were lunchtime performances at St John Smith Square, where we could then hope that our colleagues would come and hear us. But if a very high proportion of our audience are also working at home, it's a bit of a rethink as to how this might operate. So in my more pessimistic thoughts, I've had my day of conducting a large-scale choir with orchestra in St John Smith Square, but I try to be positive that a couple of years from now, it will be the norm again to be able to do such big things.
Fingers crossed. I can only see a future at the moment, which is going to be a mixture, a combination of live and Zoom remote type of things. I think it's been interesting because I've come across quite a lot of choirs who talk about their members not being keen on the remote Zoom idea. But I think there's quite a lot of blinkered thinking in the choir community. You know, there's a lot of older people who are very happy to do FaceTime with the grandchildren on an iPad, but couldn't possibly do Zoom with the choir.
Yes, well, I think those who have stuck with it have just accepted that it's not the same as being in a choir in real terms, but have got used to singing to themselves effectively. And I know that those who have been participating are still keen for it to be part of what we do. And certainly, I think going into a situation where we might be able to go back again, second time round, to real rehearsals, yes, a combination of Zoom or whatever the technology moves on to and real will be the norm. Certainly, that's what we were doing last week. I had an iPad in front of me in the church. I had a few people in front of me for real, and the rest were on Zoom. So I think, yes, this is going to be the way that it works. And that's in some respects, that's no bad thing, because it might mean that people who are not physically able to get to a choir rehearsal on a regular basis are going to gain a lot more from being in that choir, even though they're not able to get to it. And certainly with the civil service choir, we changed our name from etc. to etc. the civil service choir a few years back, and it's gradually morphed into, actually, we are the civil service choir, and we were officially recognized as such last year. But that means we're effectively, okay, we're London based, but we are also potentially available to anyone who works in the civil service anywhere in the country. And certainly there are 2 people who have joined the Zoom based rehearsals who probably would never come and join us physically because they're a long, long way away. And that's great.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, we have not a huge international following, but we do have a little group of Canadians from one particular choir in Canada who catch up afterwards. We have a few Americans. Got one very enthusiastic American lady who lives in London. She's a lawyer for a large bank. She's just got promotion to Matt. Do you remember where she's going to?
Salt Lake City.
It's okay. So she was saying that she was going back in December, and so I said, "Oh, that's terrible. You're abandoning us." "Oh no, that's awful." She said, No. I've calculated the time difference. I can do the 7 o'clock meetings in my lunch break. She said, I may not be able to sing at my desk in the office, but I can certainly practice later. So that also it'd be a rather nice thing if I could just welcome a gentleman called Andrea, who I saw earlier on coming in here. Andrea and I spoke for the first time this morning, who lives in Milan, and I think is thinking about joining us and coming along with a few friends. So that would be lovely. Andrea, okay. Good evening.
Excellent.
That's Stephen. That's a great story. I think you've made such a success of it. It's interesting because many of the comments you made about developing the recording techniques are similar to the road that we've travelled, and so it is. You can either just sit on what you've got, or you can just gradually keep trying to improve it little by little.
Yes. I think what's wonderful is some of the feedback that I've had about being involved in these recording projects, because obviously so many people are just so miserable and stuck at home, and at least it gives them something to be part of. And I don't know whether she's on this evening, but there's a lady in the civil service choir who I hope she wouldn't mind me saying, she's not the best singer at all. But she absolutely loves being in the choir, and she's part of it with 2 of her friends. And she has been in a number of the videos that we have put together, because I've said all the way through the process, you do not have to provide a recording to be in this video. And she sent me an email after the last one and said how much it meant to her that she was part of that project in her way, being there visibly, even if she didn't actually contribute to the sound. And I thought that was a very special thing that she shared with me.
So did she learn all the words?
She was miming beautifully. Yes.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So,
And she also said to me that she's now singing, because no one else can hear her. She's actually braver than she was, and is singing at home when we are doing rehearsals, which is great.
Well, I mean, we say the same thing for people who are undecided. You can join in all the rehearsals. You can practice all the parts, and because no one's going to hear you on the way through, and then you can just forget to send in an audio recording.
Yep.
No one, the Brandenburg police will not be chasing you. This is lovely. I think this is such a boost of enthusiasm which we all need to hear. And I think that your slightly concerned attitude from the future is typical of your split personality. You have this very careful, cautious part of your personality, and you also have this very adventurous, go for it part.
Yeah.
I don't see the first necessarily hindering the latter, even if you don't know which way it's all going to work out. Um, none of us
But,
do, and we
but
just think it will work out in some way.
I feel like I'm now on a therapy couch, but it's extraordinarily helpful, Bob.
Well, as I started off by saying, we've known each other for quite a while, in
Yeah,
different guises and different hats.
yes.
No, I personally I see that the way that the future, this is my guess, is that it's going to be geographically based, which you touched on with your question about the civil service working from home and being across the whole country and so on. I mean, what I'm seeing here is that there's a lot more personal, interactive, local things going on where I am on the south coast, um, and then other things that require bigger geographical stretches are infinite and can be done really almost infinite, let's say, and they will stay on Zoom. I think initially everyone was amazed by the Zoom, Teams, whichever system you use, and then after a bit, a lot of people got a bit zoomed out and fed up with it. And now I think most of us are just getting used to it, and it's becoming part. I hardly ever ring anyone on the phone now unless I'm out and about in the town, because I just talk to them like this instead. And I think that if you went back 20 years and you said to anyone over 30, how many letters have you written? Oh, loads. I write letters to people all the time. Don't worry, because in 20 years' time, you will be using electronic mail. Oh, don't be ridiculous. Absolutely out of there. Don't be. You're crazy. Go to the funny farm. And now,
Indeed.
every granny emails her grandchildren.
Yeah.
So we adapt.
Yeah, I was briefly excited. So I was in a conversation with, it was hosted by St John Smith Square, talking about how on earth they could start to get concerts going and what was happening amongst some of the key users. And there was a chap on the call who hinted at real-time technology that would allow performances across the net. And so I got very briefly excited and thought, well, how come this secret isn't out there? And then discovered that it kind of works with one or two people. And for some of this technology, you have to spend a lot of money and a lot of kit is needed to make it work. But let's hope that in due course, the technology will get better and it will make it even more viable than it currently is.
I think the problem is that there are too many links in the chain. So you can replace one bit with a low latency. This is what they call it.
Yeah.
But you're then reliant on Virgin, BT, Sky, whoever, putting a cable from the street into your house, for example, and
Exactly. Yes.
you can't go outside that link in the chain. You can't avoid it. But I mean, you probably remember I work at Guildhall part of the time, and for the senior Guildhall, I'm associated with the junior department. The seniors have an annual competition for an instrumentalist, and when they get to the final, they have to play a concerto with the symphony orchestra, a la Young Musician, BBC type of thing. And so there's usually 4 finalists, and the winners are the stellar names of the past that are now big international soloists. And so they had this problem of knowing what to do with the gold medal final, and they produced a setup there. God knows where they got the money from, of a low latency setup. So they had the strings in one room of the Guildhall, the brass in another, the woodwind in another, and the soloist and conductor in another, and produced a low latency, immediate, in the moment, not a recording stitched together, an absolute performance.
Excellent.
So it is. I think it's possible in that local area where you control all the connections. but once you get to the point where we've got two cocoa tins and a string, and we're pulling the string tight, it starts to get a bit tricky.
Yeah.
Look, this has been really fascinating. Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask you briefly, if you have any thoughts or words of advice for us for our Brahms, wie lieblich.
Yes.
Have you been involved with the Brahms many times or not at all? I mean, it could be either. It could be lots or none or whatever.
Yes, well, I'm conscious that I'm at a disadvantage because you may well have had several people already offering their thoughts on it. But I have performed it at least twice, both times at John Smith Square. Once was, this is not me as a conductor, me as a singer. Once was with the two piano arrangement, and the second one was with full orchestra, and the second one was with Roderick Williams as the baritone soloist. That was a special concert.
Just to comment on your statement, then we're using the two piano. It's a one piano duet on one piano normally, and we are using that version. And we keep in the developments rather parallel to ones you described earlier. We both keep banging on about there are disadvantages of the Zoom environment, but then there are advantages as well. And so there are ways that normally would be seen as cheating, but actually it's to the advantage of the recording. And on this occasion, we will be using one piano player playing with himself, as it were.
Yeah, good plan.
So because when we the way we do it, we put the accompaniment. We use a MIDI accompaniment, and then we put the live accompaniment on top last. So he will actually be accompanying the final vocal product. Yeah. So his instincts as an accompanist will be to really try and follow what's going on. And if you've got two people, their instincts could be similar, but slightly different. His instincts on both his recordings will be identical. So we're using 4 hands, 1 piano, 1 brain.
Great plan.
There we are. So that's using the advantages of Zoom. However, I interrupted. You were at St John Smith Square with your Brahms performances.
Yeah, so it was with Roderick Williams as the soloist. So that was great because it generated a very big audience for a start, and obviously was wonderful to hear his incredible voice doing the baritone part. So that was a good experience. I might have done it one other time, but I don't remember for sure. Prompted by you phoning me to talk about doing this, I had been I started with the Civil Service Choir what I would refer to as a rediscover concept of our Zoom sessions, where we would look at a piece for a week or two just to get people a little bit familiar with a piece, and then we'd move on to something else. And so I saw the Brahms as a good piece to include in that. So we did spend a couple of weeks on rediscover the Brahms. And I did program it in the All Souls service that we sang on Monday.
Wow.
But very frustratingly, but he's entirely forgiven because it was a reasonable excuse, the organist contacted me on Sunday night and said, look, I really haven't had time to prepare this. I'm not confident that I can play this well enough tomorrow evening. Would you mind changing what you're intending to do? So that was very disappointing because I would have loved to have said to you, well, Bob, I conducted it on Monday. And I can't. All I can say is, well, Bob, I conducted it on Monday last week and Tuesday last week in a rehearsal with a very small number of people. That's all I can say. So I've never conducted it in a performance yet, but I was so close to that. And it would have been lovely to have done it, but never mind. So any thoughts I've got on it that may in any way not have already been said by anybody else and that you don't know yourself? I think one of the questions is, how fast does it go? Because if you sort of hunt around on YouTube or Spotify, there is quite a range of tempi that people are using. It ranges from over 6 minutes long to as short as 4 minutes 56 seconds, depending on who's conducting it. And I think you struggle to find anyone who's actually doing it as slow as crotchet equals 92, because that does feel quite slow. Most of them are doing it a bit faster than that. One or two examples where it is about that. But yeah, what tempo do you do? And it's tempting to do it quite fast, but then you'll realize partway through that it turns into a bit of a nightmare because it's suddenly very fast anyway. So I think the decision on how fast it goes is a very interesting one. I'm not going to suggest how fast I think it should go, but I think that's an interesting challenge.
Well, I'd say that I think it's possible. Sorry, start from the beginning. Flow is the most important thing, and you can achieve flow at different speeds, and you can
Yeah,
definitely unachieve flow at different speeds. So long as it flows, I don't care what speed it is.
yeah. I think you could conduct it in one, and it would flow quite nicely. And there's certainly I've seen one or two YouTube performances where the conductor is kind of doing a little bit occasionally that's a bit more than one in the bar, but you could just gently let it flow on its own. Another issue I think is how you deal with hosts.
German.
Yeah, exactly. But the challenge of it's the challenge of either getting the choir to be very precise or leaving it to is it Matt who does the editing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's leaving a very, very nasty job for Matt to work on to try and get rid of a cacophony of
No,
noises everywhere.
I'm sorry. We're singing in German.
Oh, you are?
Yes. So
Oh, right.
that presents a whole raft of other problems.
Oh, yes, but Zebraart is a bit easier than hosts.
Yes.
So
Yes.
good. Oh, that's a lot easier. Good. I thought I see what you mean when you said it's German. Right. Okay. Because I think when you contacted me, you were doing it in English, I
You're
think.
absolutely right. Yes. No. We looked at it and we kept on thinking. I mean, we both wanted to do it in German, but
Yeah.
we thought that it was more familiar to some people in English. And eventually, we talked to a few of the regulars, and we talked to each other, and we eventually sort of opted for German. And it's quite interesting because we suddenly got a flood of emails saying, "Thank God you chose German. I was not going to do it if you did it in English." And
Yeah.
we also had half a dozen who said, "I couldn't possibly sing anything in German, so I'm going to duck out this." We do we operate in 4-week steps with a week in between, so
Yeah.
they're ducking out for this step and then coming back in the next time. So
Yeah.
it certainly raised strong feelings in both directions.
Well, even though you didn't brief me appropriately, I've got both versions. um,
I'd be sacked for the civil servant, wouldn't I? Poor
I
briefing.
see someone else has got it as well. Good. I think it's interesting because before I had done it the first time, which was with Jeremy Jackman of the English Baroque Choir, I didn't even know the piece, and I think there's a problem conceptually with pieces that have the word German in their title. It doesn't make it sound like it's a very exciting piece, with all due respect to Germans. And the same might be true of the German Stabat Mater by Schubert, which is a fantastic piece. But if you were to say, hey, we're going to work on the German Stabat Mater by Schubert, you wouldn't get people going, ooh, that sounds exciting. And so I approached the Brahms the first time with little idea about what it was going to be, and immediately thought, what an extraordinarily wonderful piece. And I absolutely love singing in German. It's one of my favorite languages to speak. So I'm delighted you are doing it in German now. With the civil service choir, we hadn't done anything in German in any great length as a major work until last year, and we did a concert with the two Stabat Maters by Schubert. One's in Latin and a short one, and the next one is much longer, it's about 25 minutes in German. And there was some concern within the choir about approaching German, but I just said, look, I love German. It's a very easy language to sing once you understand what the rules are, and obviously with a choir of my size, there are people in the choir who can speak German. And indeed, I probably would be troubled to find any language that someone doesn't have some connection with. So I didn't want. I'm always very conscious that if there is someone who actually speaks the language, as a conductor, rely upon them rather than you trying to make a hash of it and annoying everyone. So I would just stop the rehearsal and sort of say, "Oh, Ed, can you just let me? How does that bit get pronounced?" And then we'd move on. So yeah, German is much better. Good. Okay. So
I forget which of the sectionals it was. It was one of the late. I think you were one of the female sectionals. Matt might remember, but we ended up in a discussion as to the differences between North German pronunciation and South German pronunciation.
yes, I've been in a
So
choir rehearsal where that was
it was
discussed.
like a
Yeah.
duel, you know.
Yes. Yeah. I'm slightly going to be troubled by the fact that all of my notes are in my English version, but if you forgive me, rather than trying to find it in the later section, the bit that if you were doing it in English, where the tenors come in after the first main choral part, I think it's an interesting question as to how far you let the tenors enjoy themselves, and because they'll set the mood for the rest of it, and I think what's very interesting, this is similar to the Schubert Stabat Mater. There are a lot of crescendi and diminuendos that you have to work out what you're going to do with them. How far is the crescendo going to go? And obviously, when you're doing it on a remote basis, that's with virtual recordings, that's going to be very difficult to manage. But some indication of how far a crescendo should go is going to be quite helpful, I think. Certainly with the civil service choir, we hadn't sung anything quite so dynamically varied as the Schubert Stabat Mater before, and it was a bit of a groundbreaking experience for the choir, because I spent a lot of rehearsals getting them to practice just doing crescendo and diminuendo, and it then paid dividends for the next piece we did, which was full of them as well. So it's not as easy to manage how you get louder. I know Jeremy Jackman tends to suggest that that English choirs tend to just have on and off buttons, and they don't do so very well in doing the in-between bits. I don't think it's entirely true, but I can see someone shouting it's wrong at the screen. So then I think there's some interesting points where if we go to letter B, which in English would be "my heart and flesh ring out their joy." Apologies, I could try and find the German bit, but there is a forte piano marked at the beginning of each bar for the orchestra, and there's nothing marked for the choir, and that seems strange to me. And I think the bit where it says "my heart and flesh ring out their joy," it requires a bit of a kick for each bar from the choir. So that would be something I'd be working on. What I tend to do with the choir in rehearsals, I never go with an absolute idea of how it should go. I will just say, right, can you sing it like this? And now can you sing it like that? The reason is I want to see which version I like best. And I might ask the choir to express a view, and then I might ignore their view and go with my own. But I can see Peter's laughing on the screen because he's in the civil service choir and he knows that's what I do. Yeah, it's thumbs up. So I don't necessarily go with an absolute idea until I've heard it and found out whether it's something that pleases me. Then what else happens? Obviously, it gets very exciting when in English we're singing "They praise the Lord evermore," and it's "They praise the Lord ever," and so on. As we were saying earlier, you've got to sort of work out the tempo for that effectively in advance, so you know what that's going to be when you get to it. I think the most difficult bit of the piece is towards the end, when you've got the sopranos and altos spreading across the bars, and you've got the tenors and basses echoing each other with the quavers, "They praise thee, they praise thee." And I know certainly when I've performed it, it didn't feel like the most stable bit of the performance. And I think doing that on a virtual recording basis is going to be even more challenging to ensure people are coming in at the right point.
Well, I think I've got two thoughts on that instantly. The first is that we put them in a very protective bubble. You've actually got to be deaf not to be able to sing in the right place with our resources.
Yeah.
So that it's nailed down. That's the practical answer. The musical answer is I've just been before this session. I was in taking one of our analysis seminars, and I think Ricky's certainly here, and we were talking about this section. And for me, what it is, it's a 3 against 2. So this is D Loben, D Loben, D, and so on. With the tenors and bass, you go D Loben, D Loben, D Loben. And it's twos over a 3 pulse. And the reason why he's doing that, and that leads into an extended cadence, which instead of being a 4-bar phrase becomes a 6-bar phrase because he pulls it out. And then when it actually gets to the resolution of that cadence, what comes back in the piano orchestra? Dee, 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 dee.
Yeah.
So it's all about creating uncertainty, which means certainty becomes more certain when it comes.
Yes.
So I know exactly what you mean about that, but that's you have to wallow in the uncertainty, so that it's such a relief when that comes, the opening tune comes back.
Yeah, and I love that section because you wouldn't expect it to be there, would you? If you listen
No.
to the first part of the piece, you just think, what a lovely, tranquil piece. I could just sit and enjoy this. And then suddenly it goes a bit crazy and exciting. And it's great. It's a really lovely surprise. And as you say, yeah, it has the most sort of wonderful ending that, with not least with the chords. Well, they're not chords; they're just kind of the notes being shared between the soprano and the tenor, and between the alto and the bass, that are just wonderful. The only other thought I had, so now with the right score on page 53, is you've got a crescendo in the last phrase, with the tenors and sopranos going into the stratosphere, whilst the altos and basses are descending. And I think it's be an interesting balancing challenge to ensure that the altos and the basses get loud enough to not be overbalanced by the sopranos and tenors. Obviously, with the ability of sound engineering, you can deal with that, which is beneficial.
A bit, but
you can't do it. Yeah, not too much, but you can a little bit.
Yeah, because the sound of a soprano singing on top A flat with a forte timbre, you can't just turn it down. It's a different sound. And then that little last section at the end where it drifts away on one E flat major chord just to the end is magnificent. And that's one of my big table banging moments, because I'm waiting for one of the choir to turn round, kick the dog, pick their nose, turn the video off, because if you were in a concert, you would wait until you'd wait till the end, and you wait, and you wouldn't move, and then the accompaniment would stop, and then it'd be silent, and then you break.
Yes.
So
that's where up to now I've had the advantage, because my video footage is completely separate from the audio. I can sort of say very quietly, without too much mouth movement, stay still, stay still, stay still, stay still. Now smile.
I should have thought of that, Stephen. This has been great. It's interesting that actually all the conductors have talked about different aspects and different things, and everybody has similar but different opinions. And Matt came up with an answer to a question which came up quite early in our journey along this path, about conductors and speeds and things like that. And he said, every conductor is correct in the moment. It just happens to be different.